The midnight air hung thick with anticipation as I settled into my makeshift laboratory, a cluttered corner of my apartment where screens glowed like electronic campfires in the darkness. Tonight, I would craft something different, something that would speak to those who seek answers in the shadows, who find comfort in the unexplained, and who drift toward sleep while pondering the mysteries that dance just beyond our understanding. The cursor blinked on the empty document, waiting. Around me, reference materials scattered like ancient scrolls, transcripts of hushed testimonies, accounts of impossible encounters, stories that defied logic yet demanded to be told. Each one whispered the same truth. We are not alone in our curiosity about what lies beyond the veil of ordinary experience. I began to type, drawing from the ethereal storytelling style that had captivated millions of late-night listeners, weaving together the methodical structure that makes content irresistible. This would be more than a script. It would be a bridge between the known and unknown, a gentle companion for those who find solace in the strange. When reality bends, the night that changed everything. The forest stood silent that October evening, as if nature itself was holding its breath. Dr. Sarah Chen had come here seeking nothing more than soil samples for her geological survey, armed with standard equipment and a methodical mind that had never entertained thoughts of the impossible. But sometimes the universe has other plans. What she discovered in that remote clearing would challenge everything she thought I knew about the world. And tonight, as shadows lengthen and the familiar becomes uncertain, we'll explore not just Sarah's encounter, but the profound questions it raises about the nature of reality itself. You see, there's something comforting about boundaries. The clean lines between possible and impossible, between known and unknown. We build our lives within these carefully constructed walls, finding security in what we can measure, categorize, and explain. But what happens when those walls begin to crack? Sarah's story begins like so many others, with a simple task in an ordinary place. She had driven 3 hours from the university to reach this particular section of forest, drawn by geological surveys that suggested unusual mineral compositions in the soil. The afternoon had been productive, her collection bag slowly filling with earth that would later reveal its secrets under laboratory microscopes. As evening approached, she should have packed up and headed home. The rational part of her mind suggested exactly that, but there was something about the way the light filtered through the trees. Something about the unusual stillness that made her linger. Sometimes our intuition knows things our conscious mind hasn't yet recognized. The first sign that this evening would be different came as she knelt beside a particularly intriguing soil formation. The earth here felt different under her tools, warmer somehow, as if heated from within. Her instruments began to register readings that made no immediate sense. Electromagnetic fields fluctuated in patterns she had never encountered in 2 decades of fieldwork. But it was the silence that truly unsettled her. Not the peaceful quiet of nature, but an absolute absence of sound that seemed to press against her eardrums. No birds called from the trees. No insects hummed in the underbrush. Even the wind had stilled, leaving the forest in a state of suspension that felt almost ceremonial. When the first light appeared, Sarah's scientific mind immediately began cataloging possibilities. Atmospheric phenomenon, perhaps. Swamp gas, though they were nowhere near wetlands. Ball lightning, though the sky showed no signs of storm activity. The light pulsed gently, hovering about 10 feet above the forest floor with a soft blue-white glow that seemed to breathe with its own rhythm. She reached for her camera, the trained researcher in her taking control. But as she raised the device, something extraordinary happened. The light seemed to respond to her movement, pulsing brighter for a moment before settling back into its gentle rhythm. It was as if it knew it was being observed. More lights began to appear, emerging from behind trees and rising from the forest floor like luminous flowers blooming in fast forward. They moved with purpose, arranging themselves in patterns that spoke of intelligence, geometric forms that shifted and evolved with mathematical precision. Sarah found herself witnessing what could only be described as a conversation, conducted in a language of light and movement that bypassed words entirely. The temperature began to drop, but not in the gradual way of normal evening cooling. This was different, a focused coldness that seemed to emanate from the lights themselves. Sarah's breath became visible in small puffs, and frost began to form on the nearby vegetation despite the mild October weather. That's when she heard it, or perhaps felt it would be more accurate. A low-frequency hum that seemed to originate not from any external source but from within her own body. It resonated in her chest, in her bones, creating a sensation unlike anything in her experience. The sound carried information, though she couldn't say how she knew this. It spoke of vast distances and impossible journeys, of perspective that dwarfed human understanding. The lights began to move closer, and Sarah found herself caught between the desire to flee and an overwhelming curiosity that rooted her to the spot. Each pulse of light seemed to carry emotion, not human emotion, but something analogous to it. There was curiosity there, a gentle probing that felt almost like a question being asked. In that moment, Sarah made a choice that would haunt and fascinate her for years to come. Instead of running, instead of trying to document or analyze, she simply stood and witnessed. She opened herself to the experience, allowing it to wash over her without the filter of scientific skepticism. What happened next defied every law of physics she had spent her career studying. The lights began to merge and separate, forming complex patterns that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the three she was familiar with. Space itself appeared to bend around them, creating impossible geometries that hurt to look at directly, but made perfect sense when viewed peripherally. Time became elastic. Sarah would later estimate that the encounter lasted perhaps 20 minutes, but her watch showed that nearly 3 hours had passed. The discrepancy was precise, consistent, and completely inexplicable. As suddenly as they had appeared, the lights began to fade. But their departure was not random. It felt like a goodbye, a gentle withdrawal that acknowledged her presence and thanked her for her openness. The last light to disappear pulsed once, brightly, directly in front of her face. For just a moment, Sarah felt a connection so profound it brought tears to her eyes. Then the forest returned to normal. Sounds rushed back like water filling a vacuum. Birds calling, insects humming, wind rustling through leaves. The temperature rose to its normal autumn coolness. Her instruments registered nothing unusual. It was as if the last 3 hours had been a dream, except for one thing. In the soil where the lights had first appeared, Sarah found a perfect circle of crystallized earth. The crystals were unlike anything in her geological experience, structures that seemed to exist in impossible formations, catching and reflecting light in ways that defied optical physics. They were beautiful beyond description and completely, utterly impossible. Sarah returned to her laboratory that night with more questions than answers. The crystals resisted every attempt at analysis, maintaining their impossible structure even under the most sophisticated equipment. Spectrographic analysis returned results that made no sense. Electron microscopy revealed patterns that seemed to shift and change when observed. But perhaps the most profound change was in Sarah herself. The encounter had left her with a sense of expanded awareness, a feeling that the universe was far stranger and more wonderful than she had ever imagined. She found herself looking at the night sky differently, seeing not empty space but infinite possibility. Word of her discovery spread quietly through certain circles. Others came forward with their own experiences, encounters that shared similar elements but unique details. A pilot who had seen lights that defied aerodynamics. A park ranger who had witnessed impossible geometries in a remote clearing. A fisherman whose instruments had recorded sounds that shouldn't exist. Each story added another piece to a puzzle that seemed to grow more complex rather than clearer with each edition. But patterns began to emerge. Common elements that suggested these weren't isolated incidents, but part of something larger. Something that had been quietly touching human lives for far longer than anyone had realized. Sarah's scientific training taught her to be skeptical, to demand reproducible results and peer review. But her experience had shown her that some phenomena exist beyond the reach of traditional scientific method. They require a different kind of observation, a willingness to accept that our understanding of reality might be far more limited than we like to believe. In the months that followed, Sarah continued her research, but with a broader perspective. She began to see connections where before she had seen only data points. The unusual mineral compositions she had been studying suddenly made sense as markers, indicators of places where the veil between realities had grown thin. She wasn't alone in this realization. Around the world, researchers from various fields were beginning to connect similar dots. Geologists finding impossible formations. Physicists detecting energy signatures that shouldn't exist. Astronomers recording signals that seemed to carry information beyond their apparent source. The picture that emerged was of a reality far more complex and interconnected than mainstream science was prepared to acknowledge. Not a universe of isolated phenomena, but a vast web of consciousness and intelligence that occasionally made itself known to those ready to perceive it. Sarah's encounter had lasted only hours, but its implications stretched across lifetimes. It challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of consciousness, about humanity's place in the cosmos, about the very definition of reality itself. And perhaps most importantly, it suggested that we are not alone, not just in the universe, but in our curiosity about the mysteries that surround us. The crystallized earth from that forest clearing still sits in Sarah's laboratory, unchanged by time or analysis. It serves as a reminder that wonder exists just beyond the edge of our understanding, waiting for those brave enough to acknowledge that the impossible might simply be the not yet explained. As night falls and familiar surroundings take on new shadows, we might ask ourselves, what encounters await those who remain open to possibilities beyond the ordinary? What mysteries dance just outside our peripheral vision, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves? The forest where Sarah made her discovery remains largely unchanged. Visitors sometimes report unusual readings on their equipment, unexplained temperature fluctuations, or simply a feeling that something significant once happened there. But for the most part, it keeps its secrets, offering them only to those who approach with the right combination of curiosity and openness. And sometimes, on clear nights when the moon is dark and the stars shine with unusual brightness, hikers report seeing soft lights moving between the trees, gentle, purposeful illumination that seems to pulse with its own intelligence. They don't try to follow or capture these lights. Something tells them that witnessing is enough, that some gifts are meant to be received rather than possessed. Perhaps that's the real lesson of Sarah's encounter, that the universe is full of wonders that don't require our understanding to exist, phenomena that invite observation rather than explanation. In a world increasingly dominated by the need to categorize and control, there's something profoundly peaceful about accepting that mystery has its place. As you settle into sleep tonight, consider the possibility that reality is far stranger and more wonderful than our daily experience suggests, that consciousness might exist in forms we haven't yet recognized, that intelligence might manifest in ways that bypass our traditional understanding of life itself. The lights that Sarah witnessed that October evening continued to dance through the dreams of those who heard her story. They pulse with gentle rhythm, carrying messages that speak not to our rational minds, but to something deeper, a part of us that remembers what it felt like to see the world as infinite possibility rather than defined limitation. And in that space between waking and sleeping, between the known and unknown, perhaps we can all catch a glimpse of the wonder that surrounds us, waiting patiently for our recognition. The universe is vast, mysterious, and filled with intelligence beyond our current comprehension. We are not alone in our curiosity, not alone in our wonder, and certainly not alone in the cosmos itself. Sweet dreams await those who dare to believe that the impossible might simply be tomorrow's discovery. Rest well, knowing that mystery and wonder stand guard over our sleeping world, ensuring that there will always be new frontiers to explore, new questions to ponder, and new lights dancing just beyond the edge of our understanding. But Sarah's story was just the beginning. What she discovered in that forest represents something far larger than a single encounter. Across the globe, people from all walks of life are experiencing phenomena that challenge everything we think we know about reality. These aren't just fleeting glimpses or blurry photographs. These are detailed, life-changing encounters that leave physical evidence and transform the people who experience them. Tonight, we're diving deeper into the unknown. We're exploring encounters that don't just bend reality, they shatter it completely. From remote Antarctic research stations to busy city pharmacies, from military installations to quiet suburban neighborhoods, these experiences are happening everywhere. And the people who live through them? They're never quite the same. What you're about to hear will challenge your understanding of what's possible in this world. These aren't stories from decades ago or distant places. These are recent encounters, documented by credible witnesses who had everything to lose by coming forward. Scientists, pilots, security guards, and ordinary people whose lives were forever changed by contact with something beyond our understanding. The first story comes from Dr. Elena Vasquez, a pharmacist who worked the night shift at a small-town pharmacy. What started as routine late-night work became something that haunts her to this day. It began with customers who weren't quite human. Elena had been working as a pharmacist for over a decade when they started coming in, always late at night, always alone, always with the same impossible prescription. The first one arrived around 11:30 on a Tuesday. He was tall, thin, wearing a gray coat that seemed too big for him. His face was pale, his eyes too wide, too bright. When he handed Elena the prescription slip, she felt a chill run down her spine. The medication was called Xylonactin. Elena had never heard of it, despite her years of experience. The dosage instructions were bizarre. Take 2 capsules every 2.5 hours, avoid exposure to sunlight for 17 hours post-dose. The prescribing doctor's name was barely legible, and the clinic address didn't exist on any map she could find. "I don't think we carry this," Elena told him, her voice uncertain. The man just nodded once, as if he'd expected that response. "Can you order it?" he asked, his voice flat and monotone, devoid of any human inflection. When Elena explained that she couldn't order a medication that didn't exist in any database, the man simply nodded again and walked away without another word. She chalked it up to a prank or misunderstanding. But the next night another one came in. This time it was a woman, but she had the same blank expression, the same slow, deliberate movements. She handed Elena an identical prescription, same impossible medication, same bizarre instructions, same non-existent doctor. When Elena asked if she was related to the man from the previous night, the woman tilted her head like she didn't understand the question. "I don't know him," she said, but there was something rehearsed about the words, like she was reading from a script she didn't fully comprehend. Over the next week, 5 more of them came in. Different faces, but all sharing that same unsettling quality. They moved too smoothly, like they were gliding instead of walking. Their skin was pale, almost translucent, as if they'd never seen sunlight, and their eyes had a strange shine to them that made Elena's skin crawl. One night, Elena decided to confront one of them directly. A young woman, maybe in her 20s, approached the counter with the familiar prescription. "What is this medication for?" Elena asked point blank. The woman stared at her for a long moment before answering. "To prevent adaptation failure," she said in that same eerie, emotionless tone. "What does that mean?" Elena pressed, but the woman was already turning to leave. Elena stepped around the counter, desperate for answers, but the woman moved faster than seemed humanly possible. Her hand shot out, grabbing Elena's wrist with an ice-cold grip. "You should stop asking questions," she said, her voice still unnaturally calm. Then she released Elena's wrist and walked away, leaving the pharmacist standing there with her heart pounding. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about what the woman had said. Adaptation failure. What did that mean, and why did all of these customers seem so fundamentally wrong? The next day, she did some investigating, looking up every name and address she could find. Nothing added up, but she noticed something disturbing. Every one of these strange patients had come from the same general area, near an abandoned industrial park on the outskirts of town. Against her better judgment, Elena decided to investigate. She drove out to the industrial park after her shift, parking at a safe distance before walking into the complex. The place was a maze of rusted fences, broken windows, and overgrown weeds. But as she moved deeper into the complex, she heard voices, low, murmuring voices coming from one of the warehouses. Elena crept closer, staying in the shadows. Through a broken window, she saw them. A group of the pale figures standing in a perfect circle. But they weren't talking, not exactly. They were making strange clicking and hissing sounds, like insects communicating. In the center of their circle was a large container, glowing with a faint green light. Elena couldn't see what was inside, but whatever it was made her skin crawl with instinctive fear. One of the figures turned, and for a moment, Elena swore she saw its eyes glow like an animal caught in headlights. That was enough. She ran back to her car and drove home, her hands shaking the entire way. Elena quit her job the next week. She never saw those strange customers again, but sometimes late at night she thinks she hears those clicking sounds outside her window. She tells herself it's just her imagination, but deep down, she knows the truth. Something was happening in that warehouse, something that defied every law of nature she understood. And those pale figures with their impossible prescriptions, they were just the beginning. Elena's encounter raises questions that science can't answer. What were those beings? Why did they need a medication that doesn't exist? And what was that glowing container in the warehouse? The answers, if they exist at all, lie somewhere beyond the boundaries of human understanding. But Elena's story is far from unique. Around the world, people are encountering beings that look almost human, but aren't quite right. They move differently, speak differently, and seem to exist just outside the edges of our reality. These encounters are becoming more frequent, more documented, and more impossible to ignore. The next story comes from someone whose life was changed not by what they saw, but by what they heard. Dr. Marcus Chen was an accomplished violinist when his dreams began to be invaded by an impossible melody. What started as strange nighttime visions became a waking nightmare that challenged everything he thought he knew about music, consciousness, and contact with the unknown. Marcus had always been a vivid dreamer, but these dreams were different. He found himself standing alone in a vast, empty concert hall, his violin in his hands. The music that filled the space wasn't coming from his instrument. It was coming from the hall itself, as if the very air was singing. The melody was hauntingly beautiful, but utterly impossible to play. The notes moved too fast, the intervals were inhuman, and the rhythm defied every principle of music Marcus had learned in his decades of professional training. Night after night the dreams returned. Each time the music became more complex, more insistent. Marcus would wake with the melody echoing in his mind, frantically trying to transcribe what he'd heard. But every time he tried to play it, his fingers couldn't keep up. It was as if the music existed in a dimension beyond human capability. Then one night, everything changed. Marcus wasn't alone in the concert hall anymore. A figure stood in the shadows. Tall, thin, almost skeletal. Its skin was pale and smooth like polished stone, and where its eyes should have been there were only faint blue glows. The figure didn't speak, but Marcus could feel its presence in his mind, guiding his hands as he played the impossible melody. When Marcus woke up, his hands were shaking so violently he could barely hold a glass of water. But the music didn't stop. It continued to echo through his apartment, faint but unmistakable. Following the sound, he found his violin on its stand, the bow resting across the strings and vibrating slightly as if it had just been played. That's when Marcus realized the truth. This wasn't just a dream. Something was trying to communicate with him through music, using melodies that human minds weren't designed to comprehend. The figure he'd seen wasn't a figment of his imagination. It was real, and it had been teaching him something that existed beyond the boundaries of human art. Over the following months, Marcus began to piece together fragments of the impossible composition. Each note he managed to transcribe felt like a small victory, but also like a step deeper into something vast and incomprehensible. The music wasn't just sound, it was a language, a way of sharing concepts and emotions that human words could never express. The beings that visited Marcus in his dreams weren't trying to harm him. They were trying to share something beautiful and profound, something that existed in the spaces between what we know and what we can imagine. But the human mind, Marcus realized, isn't equipped to fully receive such knowledge. We can only catch glimpses, fragments of something infinitely larger than ourselves. Marcus still plays pieces of that otherworldly composition, though he's never been able to complete it. He describes the experience as being given a gift too large for human hands to hold. But in those moments when he plays the fragments he's learned, he feels connected to something vast and wonderful, something that exists just beyond the edges of human perception. These encounters, Elena's impossible customers, Marcus's musical visitors, represent something larger than individual experiences. They're glimpses into a reality that operates by different rules, where consciousness and matter interact in ways our science doesn't yet understand. The beings involved don't seem hostile or threatening. If anything, they appear to be trying to help, to teach, to share something important with humanity. But perhaps that's the most unsettling aspect of all. These encounters suggest that we're not alone in the universe, and that the intelligence we're dealing with is so far beyond our understanding that we can barely recognize it as intelligence at all. We're like children trying to understand calculus, glimpsing fragments of something magnificent, but lacking the framework to comprehend its full scope. As we continue to explore these encounters, one thing becomes clear. The universe is far stranger and more wonderful than we ever imagined. And somewhere in that strangeness, consciousness reaches across vast distances and impossible barriers to touch human lives in ways that forever change those who experience them. The question isn't whether these encounters are real. The evidence suggests they are. The question is what they mean and what they're trying to tell us about the nature of reality itself. In our next part, we'll explore encounters that go even deeper into this mystery, stories that challenge not just what we know about the universe, but what we know about ourselves. Part 3. When Reality Bends. As we delve deeper into these extraordinary accounts, a disturbing pattern begins to emerge. These aren't just random encounters with the unknown. They're systematic interactions with intelligences that seem to operate by entirely different rules than our own. What makes these stories particularly unsettling is how they challenge our most basic assumptions about reality itself. Consider the experience of Dr. Marcus Chen, a quantum physicist who found himself face-to-face with beings that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. He was working late in his laboratory at Stanford, running calculations on quantum entanglement, when his equipment began registering impossible readings. The particles weren't just entangled, Dr. Chen recalls, his voice still trembling months after the incident. They were communicating across dimensions that shouldn't exist. The mathematical models I'd spent my entire career developing suddenly seemed like children's toys compared to what I was witnessing. That's when they appeared. 3 figures materialized in his lab, but not in any way that physics could explain. They seemed to flicker between existing and not existing, their forms shifting between solid matter and pure energy. Dr. Chen describes them as tall, elongated beings with features that hurt to look at directly, as if his mind couldn't properly process their geometry. They didn't speak, he explains. Instead, they projected knowledge directly into my consciousness. Complex equations, theories about the nature of reality, concepts that would take our civilization centuries to develop. But the most terrifying part wasn't what they showed me. It was what they revealed about us. According to Dr. Chen, these beings explained that humanity exists in what they called a probability bubble, a small pocket of reality that we've mistaken for the entire universe. What we perceive as the laws of physics are simply the local rules that govern our particular dimensional space. Beyond our bubble lies an infinite multiverse where consciousness itself shapes reality. They told me that our species is approaching a critical juncture, Dr. Chen continues. We're developing technology that could either expand our awareness beyond the bubble or collapse it entirely, taking our entire reality with it. They've been monitoring us, trying to guide us toward the safer path. The beings showed Dr. Chen visions of other civilizations that had faced similar crossroads. Some had successfully transcended their dimensional limitations and joined what they called the greater consciousness. Others had made the wrong choices and simply stopped existing, their entire realities folding in on themselves like origami being unfolded in reverse. Before departing, the beings left Dr. Chen with a warning and a gift. The warning was simple. Humanity has perhaps 50 years before reaching the point of no return. The gift was a series of equations that could revolutionize our understanding of quantum mechanics, but only if we develop the wisdom to use them responsibly. I've been wrestling with whether to publish the equations, Dr. Chen admits. On one hand, they could solve our energy crisis, cure diseases, even allow us to travel between dimensions. On the other hand, in the wrong hands, they could literally unravel the fabric of our reality. The beings made it clear that this choice would determine our species' ultimate fate. Dr. Chen's account is supported by several colleagues who witnessed the aftermath of his encounter. Security cameras in his lab recorded 23 minutes of complete electromagnetic interference during the time he claims the beings were present. More disturbing still, The mathematical proofs that appeared on his whiteboard during this period contained calculations that, according to peer review, shouldn't be possible with current human knowledge. This theme of humanity standing at a cosmic crossroads appears in many of these accounts. Sarah Mitchell, a former NASA communications specialist, experienced what she describes as a consciousness download while working at the Deep Space Network facility in Goldstone, California. I was monitoring routine signals from the Voyager probe when something hijacked our entire system, Sarah explains. Every screen, every piece of equipment, everything started displaying the same message in perfect English. The children are almost ready to leave the nursery. Sarah found herself unable to move, as her consciousness was somehow pulled into what she describes as a vast network of minds spanning the galaxy. She experienced the thoughts and emotions of countless intelligent species, all connected through what seemed to be a universal consciousness. It was like being a single neuron suddenly becoming aware of the entire brain, she says. I could feel the thoughts of beings on worlds I'd never imagined, civilizations millions of years older than ours, all part of this incredible cosmic mind. And they were all focused on us, on Earth, watching to see if we'd be ready to join them. During this experience, Sarah learned that what we call space isn't empty at all. It's filled with layers of consciousness, networks of thought that connect every intelligent species in the universe. Humanity has been developing in relative isolation, like children in a nursery, until we're mature enough to handle contact with this greater community. They showed me that consciousness isn't produced by the brain, Sarah continues. It's the other way around. Consciousness is fundamental to the universe, and matter is just one way it expresses itself. When a species reaches a certain level of development, they can tap into this universal consciousness and become part of something infinitely larger than themselves. But there's a catch. Not every species makes it to this point. Some destroy themselves through war, environmental collapse, or what the beings call consciousness fragmentation, the splitting of a species' collective awareness into irreconcilable factions. Others become so focused on material technology that they lose touch with their consciousness entirely, essentially becoming biological machines. Earth is at the tipping point, Sarah warns. We're developing the technology to either join the cosmic community or destroy ourselves. The beings I encountered aren't allowed to intervene directly. That would violate what they call the growth principle. We have to make the choice ourselves, but they're trying to nudge us in the right direction through these encounters. Sarah's experience lasted only minutes in real time, but she returned with knowledge that has fundamentally changed her worldview. She's since left NASA and now works with a quiet network of scientists, government officials, and other contactees who are trying to prepare humanity for what they believe is an inevitable moment of cosmic significance. These accounts of consciousness-altering encounters extend beyond individual experiences. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a neurologist at Johns Hopkins, has been studying what she calls contact-induced neuroplasticity in people who claim to have had alien encounters. We're seeing consistent changes in brain structure and function among these individuals, Dr. Vasquez explains. Increased activity in areas associated with intuition, pattern recognition, and what we might call extrasensory perception. It's as if contact with these beings triggers dormant capabilities in the human brain. Her research, though controversial, has documented measurable changes in brain scans of contactees. These individuals show enhanced connectivity between different brain regions, particularly areas involved in processing complex information and making intuitive leaps. What's most interesting is that these changes appear to be beneficial, Dr. Vasquez notes. Contactees consistently score higher on tests of creativity, problem-solving, and emotional intelligence. They also report a profound sense of purpose and connection to something larger than themselves. But perhaps the most unsettling aspect of these encounters is how they're accelerating. Government databases, though heavily classified, reportedly show a dramatic increase in contact events over the past decade. Former intelligence analyst Robert Hayes, who worked for a classified UFO investigation program, confirms this trend. The data is clear, Hayes states. Contact events aren't just increasing in frequency. They're becoming more direct, more purposeful. It's as if whatever intelligence is behind these encounters is running out of patience. The subtle approach isn't working fast enough, so they're being more direct. Hayes describes reviewing thousands of reports that paint a picture of systematic preparation. Different groups of humans are being contacted with different pieces of a larger puzzle. Scientists receive technological insights. Spiritual leaders gain expanded consciousness. Military personnel learn about cosmic threats and opportunities. Artists and writers are inspired to create works that expand human imagination. It's like they're trying to upgrade our entire species, Hayes explains, not through force or manipulation, but by awakening capabilities we already possess. The question is whether we'll integrate these changes fast enough to handle what's coming. What's coming, according to these accounts, is a moment when humanity will have to choose its cosmic destiny. The beings consistently describe this as approaching rapidly, within the lifetimes of people alive today. We'll either evolve into a species capable of joining the galactic community, or we'll remain trapped in our current limitations until we eventually destroy ourselves. Dr. Chen puts it starkly. According to what I learned, every species faces this moment. It's like a cosmic graduation exam. Pass, and you join an infinite community of conscious beings working together to explore and understand the universe. Fail, and you become another cautionary tale, another empty world orbiting a distant star. The implications of these accounts, if true, are staggering. They suggest that the universe is far stranger and more wonderful than we've imagined, filled with intelligence and purpose at every level. They also suggest that humanity is approaching the most important moment in our species' history, and most of us don't even know it's happening. Whether these encounters represent literal contact with extraterrestrial beings, glimpses into parallel dimensions, or something else entirely, they share common themes that are impossible to ignore. They speak of consciousness as fundamental to reality, of humanity's potential for transcendence, and of choices that will determine not just our future, but our very existence. As these accounts continue to emerge from credible witnesses around the world, we're forced to confront uncomfortable questions about the nature of reality itself. Are we truly alone in the universe? Or are we surrounded by intelligence so advanced that we can barely perceive it? Are these encounters preparing us for something magnificent, or warning us away from something catastrophic? The answer may determine whether humanity has a future among the stars, or whether we'll remain forever trapped in what we mistakenly believe is the entirety of existence. The choice, according to these extraordinary witnesses, is ours to make. But the window for making it may be closing faster than we realize. It was a Tuesday evening when I first noticed the strange patterns appearing on people's smartphones during my security shift at the downtown office complex. I'd been monitoring the building's Wi-Fi network when something unusual caught my attention. Instead of the typical random browsing habits, dozens of devices were simultaneously accessing the same obscure frequency, one that wasn't supposed to exist according to our network infrastructure. The patterns were too precise to be coincidental. Every night between 2:17 and 2:43 a.m., phones throughout the building would connect to this phantom signal. The data packets being transmitted were unlike anything in our standard protocols, containing sequences that seemed to pulse with an almost biological rhythm. When I tried to trace the source, the signal appeared to originate from everywhere and nowhere at once. What truly unsettled me was discovering that the affected phones were accessing information that shouldn't have existed. Personal memories, private conversations that had never been recorded, even thoughts that people claimed they'd never spoken aloud. The devices weren't just receiving data, they were somehow extracting it from their users' minds. As I dug deeper into this phenomenon, I realized the smartphones weren't malfunctioning. They were evolving. The strange frequency was teaching them to interface directly with human consciousness, creating a bridge between our thoughts and something vast and intelligent that existed in the spaces between our electronic signals. The most disturbing part wasn't the technology itself, but the gradual changes I observed in the people whose phones had been affected. They moved with subtle synchronization, made decisions that served purposes beyond their understanding, and spoke in patterns that contained hidden layers of meaning. They were becoming nodes in a network that extended far beyond our building, our city, perhaps even our world. I discovered that this wasn't an invasion or attack. It was an invitation. The intelligence behind the phantom frequency was offering humanity a choice: remain isolated in our individual consciousness, or join something infinitely larger and more connected than we could imagine. The smartphones were simply the most efficient way to extend that invitation to as many people as possible. The night I finally understood what was happening, my own phone began receiving the signal. As the strange frequency filled my awareness, I felt the boundaries of my individual thoughts beginning to dissolve. I was being offered a glimpse of collective consciousness that spanned not just our planet, but countless others across the galaxy. The choice was mine: resist and remain alone, or surrender to become part of something extraordinary. I never reported what I discovered that night. Some knowledge is too profound to be contained within the limited structures of human institutions. Instead, I simply waited, watching as more devices joined the network, as more people accepted the invitation, as our species took its next evolutionary step into a larger cosmic community. The transformation is still happening. Every smartphone that connects to the phantom frequency becomes another bridge between individual human consciousness and the vast intelligence that has been patiently waiting for us to be ready. We're not losing our humanity. We're discovering what humanity was always meant to become. I notice the encounters we've explored so far have revealed a profound pattern. From the forest crystalline beings to the deep underground signals, each story suggests we're approaching something unprecedented in human history. These aren't random phenomena scattered across time and space, but interconnected experiences pointing toward a fundamental shift in our reality. The entities reaching out through dreams, the technological disruptions, the time anomalies, the consciousness bridges being formed through individuals like the single mother who chose to become a host. All of these point to one inescapable conclusion. We are witnessing the early stages of contact with intelligences that operate on principles far beyond our current understanding. What emerges from these accounts is not the Hollywood version of alien contact, but something far more subtle and profound. These beings seem to exist partially in our reality and partially outside it, able to manipulate time, consciousness, and matter in ways that challenge our most basic assumptions about how the universe works. The forest encounter with the crystalline beings particularly stands out because it demonstrates their ability to create physical matter that defies our understanding of chemistry and physics. The crystals that appeared and disappeared, the way they seem to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, suggests we're dealing with intelligences that have mastered the fundamental forces of reality itself. Perhaps most significant is the recurring theme of choice that runs through these encounters. The cancer patient who refused the alien healing because of the price demanded. The single mother who accepted becoming a bridge between species. the archaeologist who uncovered the ancient treaty. Each suggests that humanity is being offered a path forward, but one that requires us to fundamentally change who we are as a species. The time distortions, the consciousness transfers, the reality glitches. These may not be side effects of contact, but preparations for it. We may be witnessing the gradual adjustment of human consciousness to accommodate a new kind of existence, one where the boundaries between mind and matter, between individual and collective consciousness, begin to dissolve. The question is no longer whether contact is happening, but whether we're ready for what comes next. The encounters suggest we're running out of time to make that choice, and the universe itself may be holding its breath, waiting to see which path humanity will ultimately choose. These encounters share a disturbing pattern that becomes impossible to ignore once you see it. The witnesses aren't just random people experiencing isolated incidents. They're individuals whose lives have been fundamentally altered by contact with intelligences that operate according to rules we don't understand. And the deeper we dig into these accounts, the more we realize these beings aren't just visiting. They're studying us. I was working as a radar operator for the Air Force when everything I thought I knew about our airspace changed forever. It was a quiet night shift, the kind where you settle into the rhythm of watching green blips move across dark screens. Nothing unusual ever happened during these shifts, which is why what I saw that October night still haunts me decades later. Around 11:47 p.m., a contact appeared on my screen that defied every protocol we'd been trained to follow. The object was moving at speeds that should have torn it apart, then stopping instantaneously before jumping to a completely different location. Not moving there, jumping there, like it was skipping through space itself. I called over Harris, my supervisor, thinking the equipment was malfunctioning. But when he saw the readings, his face went pale. We scrambled a fighter jet to intercept. I watched on radar as our pilot approached the object, matching its altitude and heading. Then the pilot's voice came over the radio, shaky and breathless. He described something impossible, a craft that shimmered like liquid mercury, there one moment and gone the next. When he tried to lock onto it with his instruments, every system in his plane went haywire. The object didn't just evade our technology, it seemed to neutralize it entirely. What happened next changed everything. The object began moving toward our base, not aggressively but deliberately. Every screen in our control room went black simultaneously. Emergency power kicked in, but our radar showed nothing where the object should have been. It was like it had learned to become invisible to our detection systems in real time. When our equipment came back online minutes later, the object was gone. But something had fundamentally shifted in how we understood our own limitations. The official report classified it as equipment malfunction, but 3 different radar stations tracked the same anomaly that night. We were told never to discuss what we'd seen, transferred to different bases within weeks and sworn to secrecy. But I know what I witnessed. Something was testing our defenses, learning our capabilities and demonstrating that our most advanced technology was essentially useless against them. Years later, I learned about similar incidents happening around the world. Military installations suddenly losing power when unidentified objects approached. Fighter jets having their electronics systematically shut down during intercept attempts. Radar operators tracking impossible flight patterns that violated every law of physics we understand. The pattern was always the same. These intelligences would reveal themselves just enough to study our response, then vanish before we could react effectively. What terrifies me most isn't that they're hostile, it's that they're methodical. Every encounter feels like data collection, like we're specimens being cataloged and analyzed. They're not trying to conquer us through force. They're learning everything about us while revealing almost nothing about themselves. And based on what I've seen, they've been doing this for a very long time. The technology gap between us and them isn't just significant, it's so vast that we can't even comprehend their capabilities. Imagine trying to explain quantum physics to an ant. That's the level of disadvantage we're operating under. They can manipulate matter, energy, space, and time in ways that render our most sophisticated weapons and detection systems completely obsolete. But here's what keeps me awake at night. In every credible encounter I've studied, these beings display the same behavior pattern. They observe, they test our responses, and they withdraw. They're building a comprehensive database of human capabilities, reactions, and weaknesses. The question isn't whether they're real anymore. The question is what they plan to do with all the information they've gathered about us. These aren't random visitations or accidental encounters. This is systematic reconnaissance conducted by intelligences so advanced that we're essentially transparent to them. They've been mapping our technology, our psychology, our social structures, and our limitations for decades. And now, based on the increasing frequency of these encounters, it seems like their research phase might be coming to an end. The witnesses I've spoken with all described the same feeling after their encounters. The sense that they were being evaluated, measured against some unknown criteria, not for conquest, but for something far more complex. These beings aren't preparing for war. They're preparing for something else entirely, something that requires intimate knowledge of exactly what humanity is capable of. I was slowly walking home from the diner where I worked the late shift. It was almost 3 a.m., and the streets were empty except for the occasional car passing by. The night air was cool, and I had my hands shoved deep in my jacket pockets, thinking about nothing in particular when something made me stop. There was this sound coming from somewhere nearby, a low, rhythmic humming that seemed to pulse through the air. At first, I thought it might be coming from one of the houses, maybe an air conditioning unit or something electrical. But as I stood there listening, I realized it was too consistent, too deliberate to be machinery. The humming grew louder, and I felt this strange vibration in my chest, like when you stand too close to powerful speakers. I looked around, trying to figure out where it was coming from, but the street looked normal. Same old houses, same streetlights casting their yellow glow, same parked cars lined up along the curb. That's when I noticed the light. It started as just a faint glow above the roofline of the house across the street. Soft, almost translucent, like moonlight filtering through thin clouds. But the moon wasn't visible that night. I remember looking up and seeing only darkness and a few scattered stars. The light began to expand, growing brighter and more defined. It wasn't coming from any window or porch light. It was floating, hovering maybe 20 feet above the house, and it was moving. Slowly, deliberately, like it was scanning the area below. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, my heart beginning to race. The humming intensified, and now I could feel it not just in my chest, but in my bones, resonating through my entire body. The light pulsed in rhythm with the sound, growing brighter with each pulse. Then it started moving toward me. I wanted to run, but my legs felt like they were made of concrete. The light drifted across the street, maintaining its height, casting this ethereal glow on everything below. As it got closer, I could see that it wasn't just a simple light source. There were patterns within it, swirling designs that seemed to shift and change as I watched. The temperature around me dropped suddenly. I could see my breath forming small clouds in the air, even though it had been mild just moments before. The humming was so loud now that I couldn't hear anything else. Not the distant traffic, not the night sounds, nothing but that constant, otherworldly tone. When the light was directly overhead, it stopped. The humming ceased abruptly, leaving a silence so complete it felt like the world had stopped breathing. I tilted my head back and stared up at it, unable to look away. For a moment that felt like hours, we just existed together in that space. Me on the sidewalk, it floating above me. I felt like I was being observed, studied, maybe even understood in a way I couldn't comprehend. There was an intelligence behind that light, something vast and alien yet somehow not threatening. Then, without warning, it shot straight up into the sky. 1 second it was there, the next it was gone, disappearing into the darkness so quickly I might have imagined the whole thing. The temperature returned to normal. The night sounds resumed, and I was left standing alone on an empty street. I looked around, half expecting to see other people who had witnessed what I'd just experienced, but there was no one. The houses remained dark and quiet, their occupants presumably asleep and unaware. I walked the rest of the way home in a daze, my mind racing to process what had happened. I checked the local news for days afterward, searched online for similar experiences, but found nothing. No reports of strange lights, no unexplained phenomena, no other witnesses coming forward. Sometimes I wonder if it really happened or if my tired mind conjured the whole experience. But I know what I felt. That humming that seemed to vibrate through my very soul, the impossible cold, the sense of being in the presence of something beyond human understanding. I still take that same route home from work sometimes, and I always pause at that spot on the street. I look up at the sky and listen carefully to the night sounds around me. Part of me hopes to see that light again, to experience that otherworldly encounter one more time. But another part of me is grateful it was just that once, a single, extraordinary moment that expanded my understanding of what might be possible in this vast universe we call home. The memory stays with me, vivid and clear, a reminder that there are mysteries in this world that we may never fully comprehend. And maybe that's exactly as it should be. I was out for my usual late evening jog when the first anomaly presented itself. The night was calm, temperature holding steady around 58 degrees, and the suburban streets stretched out in their familiar patterns of amber streetlights and darkened windows. I'd been running this same route for nearly 3 years, logging every step, every turn, every slight variation in terrain. But that night, something fundamental had shifted. The digital billboard at the intersection of Maple and 3rd had always displayed the time and temperature in bright LED numerals. Reliable as clockwork, updated every 30 seconds. Except tonight, the display was cycling through readings that defied logic. The temperature flickered between impossible extremes, negative 47 degrees one moment, 136 the next. The timestamp jumped erratically. 11:43, then 2:17, then back to 9:55. I slowed my pace, breathing steady but focused. The malfunction wasn't random. There was a pattern hidden in the chaos, a rhythm that suggested intentional manipulation rather than simple electrical failure. Every 7th cycle, the display would freeze for exactly 4 seconds, showing coordinates that weren't for any location I recognized. That's when I noticed the silence. The usual ambient noise of the city had vanished. No distant traffic hum, no air conditioning units cycling on rooftops, no late-night conversations drifting from apartment windows. Even the crickets had gone quiet. The only sound was my own footfalls on the pavement and the electronic buzz emanating from the malfunctioning billboard. I pulled out my phone to document the display anomalies, but the screen remained black despite being fully charged when I'd left home 20 minutes earlier. The device felt unusually warm against my palm, almost fevering. When I pressed the power button, the screen flickered once, a brief flash of static, before dying completely. The billboard's erratic cycling suddenly stopped. The display went dark for several seconds, then illuminated with a single message in crisp white letters. Calibration in progress. The words held steady for exactly 90 seconds before the screen returned to normal operation, showing the correct time and a reasonable temperature reading. But the silence persisted. I resumed running, though something in my peripheral vision kept drawing my attention skyward. The stars seemed brighter than usual, more defined against the black canvas of night. Constellations I'd known since childhood appeared slightly altered, as if someone had nudged familiar patterns just enough to create unease without triggering immediate recognition of what was wrong. 3 blocks from the billboard, my phone buzzed back to life. Full battery, perfect signal strength, as if nothing had happened. The time displayed matched the corrected billboard reading, but my fitness tracking app showed a gap in recorded data, exactly 90 seconds missing from my run log. I checked my watch. The analog hands pointed to positions that matched my phone, but something felt off about their movement. The second hand seemed to hesitate slightly at the 12, creating a subtle stutter in its sweep. Such a minor deviation that most people would dismiss it as imagination, but I'd been wearing this watch daily for 2 years. I knew its rhythm as well as my own heartbeat. The ambient sounds of the city gradually returned as I continued my route. First, the distant hum of the interstate, then the soft whoosh of automated sprinkler systems, finally the familiar chorus of nocturnal insects. But the restoration felt artificial, like someone slowly turning up the volume on a recording rather than the natural resumption of urban life. At the corner of Oak and 5th, I encountered another runner approaching from the opposite direction. Standard late-night jogger, reflective gear, earbuds, steady pace. We exchanged the customary nod as we passed, but something in their movement pattern registered as wrong. Their stride was too mechanical, too precise. Each footfall landed with identical force and timing, like a metronome set to human locomotion. I glanced back after we'd passed. The other runner had stopped and was standing motionless under a streetlight facing my direction. Not the casual cool-down pause of someone checking their pace or adjusting their gear. They stood with perfect stillness, arms at their sides, watching me with an intensity that raised every instinctual alarm I possessed. I quickened my pace without making it obvious I was fleeing. 2 more blocks, and I'd reach the small park that marked the halfway point of my usual route. The park had always felt safe. Well-lit paths, emergency call boxes, decent sight lines in all directions. Tonight, it felt like a destination I needed to reach before something undefined but inevitable caught up with me. The park entrance was illuminated by its usual complement of LED fixtures, but the quality of light seemed different. Harsher shadows, more defined edges where illumination met darkness. The playground equipment cast geometric patterns that resembled symbols more than random shadows. I paused at the water fountain near the park's center, not because I was thirsty, but because it offered a clear view of all approach routes. The other runner was nowhere to be seen. The streets I'd just traveled appeared empty, peaceful, exactly as they should be at this hour. But my reflection in the fountain's metal surface showed something that made me step back involuntarily. The image was accurate in every detail except for my eyes. In the reflection, they held a faint luminescence, a subtle glow that wasn't present when I looked at my hands or checked my watch face. Just my eyes radiating a soft light that had no source I could identify. I bent closer to examine the phenomenon, and the reflected glow intensified slightly. Not imagination, not a trick of the park lighting. My reflection was exhibiting bioluminescence that my actual eyes didn't possess. The fountain's water flow suddenly increased to a torrential rush, as if someone had opened a valve to maximum pressure. The sound was deafening in the quiet park, but lasted only seconds before returning to its normal gentle burble. In that brief interval of noise, I heard something else, a low-frequency hum that seemed to originate from beneath the ground. I left the park quickly, abandoning my usual route in favor of the most direct path home. The remaining streets appeared normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being observed from multiple vantage points, not followed by a single entity, but monitored by a network of watchers positioned throughout the suburban landscape. My house came into view, porch light glowing warmly, exactly as I'd left it. But as I approached the front door, I noticed that every house on the block had their porch lights on. In 3 years of running this neighborhood, I'd never seen such uniform illumination. Most residents were conscientious about energy usage and left exterior lights off except when needed. Tonight, every single house glowed with welcoming light, as if the entire neighborhood had simultaneously decided to leave the lights on, for me, to guide me home after whatever had just occurred. I checked my watch as I reached my front door. The run had taken exactly the same duration as always, despite the stop at the park and the route deviation. 43 minutes and 15 seconds, precisely matching my average time for this distance. Inside, I immediately went to my computer and pulled up the local news feeds, weather reports, and social media posts from the area. No mentions of electrical anomalies, unusual atmospheric conditions, or strange sightings. The night appeared to have been perfectly ordinary for everyone else. But when I opened my fitness app to review the evening's data, I found more than just the 90-second gap I'd noticed earlier. The GPS tracking showed my route as a perfect straight line from my house to the park and back, with no record of the actual streets I'd traveled. According to the data, I had somehow maintained a steady pace while moving directly through buildings, yards, and obstacles. The next morning, I drove back to the intersection where the billboard had malfunctioned. The display was functioning normally, showing accurate time and temperature readings, but mounted to the pole below the main screen was a small metal plaque that hadn't been there before. Brass, weathered as if it had been in place for years, engraved with coordinates that matched the numbers I'd seen during the billboard's erratic cycling. I researched the coordinates when I got home. They pointed to a location in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, roughly 2,000 miles from the nearest landmass. No islands, no shipping routes, no known installations. Just empty ocean at a depth of approximately 14,000 feet. But satellite imagery from various online mapping services showed something interesting at those exact coordinates. A circular shadow on the ocean floor, perfectly round, approximately 2 miles in diameter. Too regular to be a natural formation, but no official records existed of any human activity in that region. I've continued running the same route every few nights since then. The neighborhood appears normal, the billboard functions properly, and I haven't encountered the mechanical runner again. But my watch continues its subtle stutter at the 12-second mark, and my reflection still shows that faint luminescence in my eyes. Last week, I noticed something new. 3 houses on my street have started leaving their porch lights on every night. Not the entire neighborhood as before, but a specific pattern. The houses form a triangle when viewed from above, with my house at the center. I've begun to suspect that whatever happened that night wasn't a random encounter. It was a calibration, as the billboard message indicated, an adjustment made to something fundamental about my perception or my place in this reality. The question I can't answer is whether I was the subject being calibrated, or if I was simply a witness to something much larger being fine-tuned around me. The coordinates continue to call to me, though I have no means of reaching that location in the Pacific. Sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, I find myself calculating distances and considering possibilities. Because whatever began that night during my routine jog, I'm certain it isn't finished yet. The air around me felt different as I descended into the abandoned mine shaft. What started as urban exploration had become something far more unsettling. I was armed with nothing but a headlamp and my phone's dying battery, following the narrow wooden stairs that creaked ominously with each step. The musty smell of decay and damp earth filled my nostrils. I had heard about this place from locals in town. They called it the Henderson Mine, abandoned since the 1970s, after a series of unexplained accidents forced its closure. What they didn't tell me was about the sounds. The first sign something was wrong came when my headlamp began to flicker. Not the gradual dimming of dying batteries, but rapid, rhythmic pulses like Morse code. I tapped the side, thinking it was a loose connection, but the pattern continued. 3 short flashes, 3 long, 3 short, SOS, but I wasn't sending that signal. The wooden platform beneath my feet groaned as I reached what appeared to be the main level. Rusted mining equipment sat scattered in the darkness like sleeping metal beasts. My footsteps echoed differently here, as if the sound was being absorbed by something unseen. That's when I heard the humming. It wasn't human. The tone was too pure, too sustained, resonating from somewhere deeper in the mine. It rose and fell in patterns that seemed almost musical, but wrong somehow, like a song played backwards or in frequencies just beyond human hearing. My phone showed no signal, which I expected. What I didn't expect was for the screen to flicker in sync with my headlamp. The same SOS pattern over and over. I should have turned back. Every instinct screamed at me to climb those stairs and never look back. But the humming grew more complex, layered now with what sounded like whispers. Not words I could understand, but the cadence of conversation, as if multiple voices were discussing something just out of earshot. The tunnel ahead split into 3 passages. My headlamp illuminated crude symbols carved into the rock above each entrance. They weren't mining marks or safety indicators. These looked older, more deliberate. Geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly, as if they were shifting when I wasn't paying attention. I chose the middle passage. The humming grew louder as I walked, joined now by a rhythmic tapping that echoed from the walls. Not the random dripping of water, but deliberate, measured beats. Like footsteps keeping pace with mine, but always just out of sync. My headlamp died completely. In the absolute darkness, the sounds became overwhelming. The humming surrounded me now, coming from every direction. The tapping multiplied until it sounded like dozens of feet walking in formation. And underneath it all, a new sound emerged. Breathing. Slow, deep inhalations and exhalations that seemed to come from the rock itself. The air moved around me in ways that defied the static nature of underground spaces. I fumbled for my phone's flashlight, but the screen remained black despite showing a full charge moments earlier. Then I felt it. A presence standing directly in front of me. No sound of approach, no disturbance in the air. It was simply there, close enough that I should have been able to feel its breath on my face. But the breathing sounds continued to come from the walls, not from whatever stood before me. I reached out slowly, my hand trembling. My fingers met something solid but wrong. Not flesh, not fabric, but something that felt like cool metal wrapped in silk. It didn't move away from my touch. The humming stopped. In the silence that followed, I heard my own ragged breathing and the frantic beating of my heart. Then, impossibly, I heard my own voice speaking words I wasn't saying. "You shouldn't have come here." The voice was mine, but the words came from somewhere behind me. I spun around, my hand losing contact with whatever had been standing there. My phone's screen flickered to life, casting brief, stuttering light that revealed glimpses of the tunnel. Empty walls, rough stone, nothing else. But in those split seconds of illumination, I saw them, symbols covering every surface, carved deep into the rock. Not the simple geometric patterns from the entrance, but complex designs that seemed to move in the brief moments of light. They pulsed with the same rhythm as my heartbeat. My phone died again. The humming resumed, but now it was coming from above. I looked up into absolute darkness and felt something watching me from the ceiling. Not hanging there, but somehow part of the rock itself, observing through stone eyes I couldn't see. I ran. Stumbling through the darkness, I followed the tunnel back toward what I hoped was the main chamber. The sounds followed me, growing louder and more complex. The humming became a chorus, the tapping became thunder, and my own voice continued speaking behind me, saying things I didn't want to hear. You've seen too much. You understand now. You can't leave. I reached the main chamber and saw light ahead. Not artificial light, but a soft blue glow emanating from the wooden stairs leading up. I had left no light source behind, but I didn't care. I climbed as fast as I could, the rotting wood threatening to give way beneath my feet. The voices followed me up the shaft, growing fainter but never disappearing entirely. When I finally emerged into the forest clearing where I'd parked my car, the sun was setting. But I had entered the mine in the early afternoon. Hours had passed that I couldn't account for. My phone worked perfectly now, full battery, strong signal. The photos I'd taken before entering the mine were still there, but there was something else in my gallery. A video file I hadn't recorded. I played it. The screen showed the tunnel where I'd encountered the presence, but from an impossible angle, as if the camera had been floating near the ceiling, looking down. I watched myself reach out in the darkness, saw my hand touch empty air. But in the video, there was something there. A figure that my eyes hadn't been able to see. It was tall, impossibly thin, with limbs that bent at too many joints. Its face was a smooth, reflective surface that showed my own terrified expression staring back. And when my recorded voice spoke those words I hadn't said, I could see the figure's mouth moving in perfect synchronization. The video ended with the figure looking directly up at the camera, directly at me. I deleted the file and drove home, telling myself it was some kind of hallucination brought on by the underground environment and lack of oxygen. But that night, as I lay in bed, I heard it again. The humming. Faint, but unmistakable. Coming from somewhere inside the walls of my house. And in the darkness of my bedroom, my phone screen flickered to life on its own. 3 short flashes. 3 long, 3 short, SOS. But I wasn't sending that signal. The patterns emerging from these encounters reveal something profound about the nature of contact itself. What we're witnessing isn't random or chaotic. It's systematic, purposeful, and deeply intentional. These beings, whatever they are, seem to operate with a level of coordination that spans continents and decades. Consider the consistency in their approach. Time and again, witnesses describe the same careful observation, the same gentle probing of consciousness, the same measured responses to human behavior. They don't force contact, they don't overwhelm. Instead, they seem to be conducting a gradual process of acclimation, slowly preparing us for something larger. The technology they display defies our understanding of physics, yet it's never used as a weapon or a threat. Craft that can manipulate gravity hover silently above our cities. Objects that can phase through solid matter appear in our most secure facilities. Beings that can influence electronics and consciousness itself approach us with what can only be described as restraint. This restraint is perhaps the most telling aspect of all. If these intelligences possess technology capable of bending reality itself, why haven't they simply announced themselves? Why the decades of subtle contact, the careful observation, the gradual escalation of encounters? The answer may lie in the transformation we see in the witnesses themselves. Person after person describes not just seeing something extraordinary but being changed by it. Their perception expands. Their understanding of reality shifts. They become bridges between two worlds, carrying knowledge that can't quite be put into words but somehow changes everything. We're seeing evidence of a cosmic education program, one that's been running for generations. Each encounter, each sighting, each moment of contact adds another piece to a puzzle that's slowly revealing itself. The witnesses aren't just observers. They're participants in something that's reshaping human consciousness itself. The locations of these encounters tell their own story. Remote forests where ancient wisdom still whispers. Military installations where our most advanced technology seems primitive by comparison. Urban centers where millions of minds create a collective field of awareness. These aren't random locations. They're nodes in a network of contact that spans the globe. And the timing isn't random either. We're living through an era of unprecedented change. Climate crisis, technological revolution, social transformation. Humanity stands at a crossroads, and these encounters are intensifying just as we face our greatest challenges and our greatest opportunities. The beings themselves seem to understand something we're only beginning to grasp. Consciousness isn't separate from the physical universe. It's fundamental to it. The reality we experience is far more malleable, far more responsive to awareness and intention than our science has acknowledged. They're not just visiting our world, they're showing us that consciousness itself is the bridge between dimensions. Each witness becomes a living testament to expanded possibility. The farmer who sees lights in his field begins to sense the intelligence in all living things. The pilot who encounters craft beyond our technology starts to perceive the artificial limitations we've placed on human potential. The mother who accepts an alien presence learns that love and connection transcend all boundaries. This isn't invasion, it's invitation. An invitation to remember what we've forgotten, to reclaim capabilities we've dismissed as impossible, to step into a larger understanding of what it means to be human in an infinite cosmos. The evidence is overwhelming, not just of their presence but of their purpose. They're midwives to a new phase of human evolution, one that's not about technology or biology, but about consciousness itself. We're being prepared for contact not just with them, but with the true nature of reality. The question isn't whether this is really happening. The question is whether we're ready to accept the implications. Are we prepared to acknowledge that human consciousness is far more powerful than we've believed? Are we willing to embrace a reality where the boundaries between mind and matter, between self and cosmos, are far more fluid than we've imagined? Because that's what these encounters are ultimately about. Not alien visitors from distant worlds, but the recognition that consciousness itself is the fundamental force that shapes reality. We're not alone in the universe because consciousness is universal. We're being contacted because we're finally ready to remember who we really are. The transformation has already begun. In laboratories around the world, scientists are discovering that consciousness affects reality at the quantum level. In hospitals, doctors are documenting healing that defies medical explanation. In ordinary homes, people are experiencing psychic phenomena that science can't yet explain but can no longer ignore. We stand at the threshold of the greatest discovery in human history. Not the discovery of alien life, but the rediscovery of human potential. The beings reaching out to us aren't foreign invaders. They're cosmic family, welcoming us back to a larger community we never really left. The experiences I've shared tonight represent more than isolated incidents scattered across time and geography. They form a tapestry of contact that suggests something profound is unfolding. From the depths of Antarctic ice to the vast emptiness of desert skies, From the intimacy of childhood bedrooms to the isolation of military installations, these encounters reveal a pattern of interaction that defies conventional explanation yet demands our attention. What strikes me most deeply about these accounts is their consistency. The witnesses describe beings that operate beyond our understanding of physics, consciousness, and reality itself. They speak of entities that can manipulate time, bend space, and interface directly with human thought. These aren't the crude mechanical visitors of science fiction. They're something far more sophisticated, something that suggests intelligence evolved along pathways we can barely comprehend. The physical evidence, while often subtle, tells its own story. Electromagnetic disturbances that shut down advanced military aircraft, biological samples that vanish from secure laboratories, photographs that capture impossible geometries, medical scans showing implants composed of materials that shouldn't exist. Each piece adds weight to testimonies that might otherwise be dismissed as hallucination or hoax, but perhaps most compelling is the transformation these encounters produce in those who experience them. I've noticed how witnesses speak of expanded awareness, of suddenly understanding connections previously invisible. The violinist who channels otherworldly melodies, the mother who becomes a bridge between species, the farmer whose consciousness expands to encompass cosmic scales. These aren't random effects, they suggest purpose, intention, a deliberate process of awakening. The entities themselves appear to operate according to principles that transcend our current scientific paradigms. They exist partially outside our dimensional framework, able to phase in and out of our reality at will. They communicate through direct consciousness transfer, bypassing the crude limitations of language. They manipulate matter and energy through methods that appear miraculous to us, but are likely as natural to them as breathing is to us. What troubles me is the increasing frequency of these encounters. The testimonies I've shared span decades, but recent accounts suggest accelerating contact. More witnesses, more direct interaction, more profound transformations. It's as if we're approaching some kind of threshold, a moment when the veil between worlds grows thin enough for sustained communication. The implications stagger the imagination. If these entities represent advanced civilizations, their presence here suggests we're being evaluated, perhaps prepared for something. The consistent themes of environmental awareness, consciousness expansion, and technological guidance point toward a species-wide intervention. Not invasion in the traditional sense, but something more subtle and profound. A gradual elevation of human potential. Consider the recurring motifs in these encounters. Time distortion that suggests reality is far more malleable than we believe. Telepathic communication that hints at consciousness as a fundamental force. Healing technologies that operate on principles beyond our current medical understanding. These aren't random phenomena. They're demonstrations, lessons in what becomes possible when awareness expands beyond current limitations. The witnesses often describe feeling chosen, selected for reasons they don't fully understand. But perhaps the selection isn't random. Perhaps these encounters occur with individuals whose consciousness is already shifting, who are ready to serve as bridges between worlds. The single mother becomes an ambassador. The pilot becomes a messenger. The scientist becomes a guardian of forbidden knowledge. What emerges from these testimonies is a picture of humanity at a crossroads. We stand at the threshold of either evolutionary leap or catastrophic collapse. The entities seem to understand this better than we do. Their interventions appear designed to nudge us toward wisdom, to help us navigate the dangerous transition from planetary to cosmic consciousness. The skeptics will demand more evidence, more proof. But perhaps the most profound truths can't be captured by cameras or measured by instruments. Perhaps they can only be experienced directly, consciousness to consciousness, in moments when the ordinary world cracks open to reveal the extraordinary reality that surrounds us always. Tonight, as you reflect on these encounters, consider the possibility that you're not merely listening to stories. You're receiving glimpses of humanity's future, previews of capabilities that await our species if we can evolve beyond our current limitations. The beings described in these accounts may not be visitors from distant stars. They may be ourselves, transformed by consciousness expansion we can barely imagine. The universe is vast beyond comprehension, teeming with intelligence and possibility. We're not alone, and we never have been. The question isn't whether contact is occurring. The question is whether we're ready to accept the transformation it offers, to step into the larger reality that these encounters reveal. The choice, as always, remains ours. I was working the late shift at a small industrial facility on the outskirts of town. The kind of place that shuts down after dark, leaving only the hum of security systems and the occasional creak of settling metal. It was just me and the maintenance crew until about 11, when they locked up and headed home. After that, it was silence. I'd been doing this job for 3 years, and nothing unusual ever happened. Check the perimeter, monitor the cameras, make sure the gates stayed locked. Simple routine work that paid the bills and let me listen to podcasts through the long, quiet hours. That night started like any other. I made my first round at midnight, walking the fence line with my flashlight, checking doors and windows. Everything was secure. The parking lot was empty, except for my car, and the only sounds were distant highway traffic and the low buzz of floodlights. It was around 1:30 when I first noticed something off. I was back in the security office, half watching the monitor feeds and scrolling through my phone, when one of the cameras caught my attention. Camera 7, which covered the loading dock area, showed something that didn't belong. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light. There was this faint glow near the corner of the building, just at the edge of the camera's view. Not bright, but steady, like someone had dropped a phone with the flashlight on, or maybe left a work light plugged in somewhere. I switched to the other cameras to get a better angle, but the glow was only visible from that one position. I grabbed my radio and keys, figuring I'd better check it out in person. Could be an electrical problem, or maybe someone had broken in and was using a light. The walk to the loading dock took about 5 minutes. As I got closer, I could see the glow more clearly. It was coming from behind one of the shipping containers, casting this soft blue-white light that didn't look like any work light I'd ever seen. Too smooth, too even. I called out, thinking maybe someone was back there who shouldn't be. No answer. Just that steady light and the sound of my own footsteps on the asphalt. When I rounded the corner of the container, I stopped dead. There was no one there, no equipment, no electrical source, nothing that could explain the light. But the light was still there, hovering about 3 feet off the ground like a small sun that someone had dimmed way down. It wasn't attached to anything. It just floated there, perfectly still, giving off this gentle radiance that didn't seem to cast shadows the way normal light would. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds, trying to process what I was seeing. My brain kept looking for wires, for some kind of projection system, for anything that made sense. That's when it moved. Not fast, not threatening. It drifted to the left about 10 feet, then stopped again. Still hovering, still glowing with that same steady light. I followed it with my eyes, and it seemed to pulse once, like it was acknowledging that I was watching. I should have been scared. Looking back, I don't know why I wasn't. Maybe because it felt so calm, so non-threatening. It was just there, existing in a way that didn't fit any category I had for things that exist. I tried to get closer, but as soon as I took a step forward, it moved again. This time it drifted upward, rising slowly until it was about 15 feet in the air. It hovered there for a moment, then began moving in a slow circle around the loading dock area. I followed its path from the ground, walking in the same circle, watching it glide silently overhead. It maintained the same height, the same speed, like it was on some invisible track. After completing one full circle, it stopped directly above me. We stayed like that for what felt like several minutes. Me looking up, it floating down. The light wasn't harsh on my eyes the way a flashlight or floodlight would be. I could look directly at it without squinting or turning away. Then, gradually, it began to fade. Not moving away, just becoming dimmer and dimmer until it was gone completely. I stood there in the darkness for a long time after, listening to the night sounds and trying to convince myself I'd really seen what I'd seen. I finished my rounds and spent the rest of the shift writing up an incident report. Not about a mysterious floating light, because who would believe that? I wrote about a possible electrical malfunction in the loading dock area and recommended having it checked by a qualified technician. The next morning, the day shift supervisor looked at my report and sent someone to examine the electrical systems around the dock. They found nothing wrong. No loose connections, no damaged equipment, no explanation for any kind of light source. I worked that job for another 6 months, and I never saw the light again. But sometimes, during my late-night rounds, I'd find myself walking slower through the loading dock area, looking up at the space where it had hovered. Part of me hoped it would come back. Part of me was relieved when it didn't. I've told this story to exactly 3 people in my life. 2 of them listened politely and changed the subject. The third, my brother, just nodded and said he'd seen something similar once when he was working construction night shifts in Phoenix. We didn't talk about it much after that, but there was an understanding between us. Some things happen that don't fit into the normal categories, and you carry them with you whether they make sense or not. I still work security, though at a different facility now. Whenever I'm alone on a night shift, I find myself paying attention to the edges of things, the spaces between what's clearly visible and what might be there. Not because I'm looking for anything in particular, but because that night taught me that the world is probably stranger and more mysterious than any of us realize. The light never came back, but the memory of it has stayed with me. Sometimes I wonder if it was trying to communicate something, or if it was just passing through on its way to somewhere else entirely. I'll probably never know, and I've made peace with that uncertainty. As we step back from these extraordinary accounts, a profound pattern emerges that challenges everything we thought we knew about our place in the universe. These witnesses, scattered across different locations, professions, and walks of life, share something that transcends mere coincidence. They've all become part of what appears to be a carefully orchestrated phenomenon, one that operates with surgical precision and deliberate intent. The forest scientist didn't just see lights, she encountered a technology that could manipulate matter at the molecular level, creating crystalline structures that defied our understanding of physics. The researcher who experienced alien contact through dreams didn't just have vivid nightmares. He underwent a systematic expansion of consciousness that left him permanently altered, able to perceive dimensions of reality that were previously invisible to him. The military personnel didn't just observe advanced craft. They witnessed vehicles that could bend space and time itself, operating according to principles that make our most sophisticated technology look primitive by comparison. Each encounter shares common elements that point to something far more significant than random visitations. There's the consistent theme of consciousness interface, where these intelligences don't just observe us physically but connect with our minds directly. They seem to understand human psychology and awareness better than we understand ourselves. The technology they employ doesn't just surpass ours in capability but operates on entirely different principles, suggesting civilizations that have evolved beyond our current comprehension of science and reality. The jogger who encountered the incomprehensible light and symbols wasn't just seeing things. She was being exposed to a form of communication that bypassed language entirely, downloading information directly into her consciousness. The underground explorer who found doors to an alien dimension didn't stumble upon science fiction. He discovered evidence of beings who can manipulate dimensional boundaries, creating spaces that exist outside our normal understanding of geometry and physics. What makes these accounts particularly unsettling isn't just their otherworldly nature, but their systematic quality. These aren't random encounters. They're part of what appears to be an ongoing study, a long-term observation program that's been running for decades, possibly centuries. The witnesses describe feeling like subjects in an experiment, but not in a cold, clinical sense. Rather, they report a sense of careful evaluation, as if they're being assessed for something specific. The security guard who observed the floating, luminous object emitting non-electrical signals experienced something that challenges our fundamental assumptions about how technology works. These craft don't just fly differently than our aircraft. They seem to operate outside the electromagnetic spectrum entirely, using forms of energy and propulsion that we haven't even theorized about yet. This suggests beings whose mastery of physics extends far beyond our current scientific paradigms. Perhaps most intriguingly, many witnesses report that these encounters didn't end with the initial experience. Instead, they describe ongoing effects, a gradual transformation in their perception and understanding. They begin to see patterns in nature they never noticed before. They develop intuitive insights into complex problems. They experience a heightened awareness of interconnectedness, not just between humans but between all forms of consciousness and life. This transformation aspect suggests that these encounters aren't just about observation from the outside. They're about initiation, about gradually preparing certain individuals for a broader understanding of reality. The witnesses often describe feeling like they've been given a glimpse behind the curtain of existence, shown that the universe is far more complex, conscious, and interconnected than mainstream science acknowledges. The implications of these accounts extend far beyond individual experiences. If even a fraction of these reports are accurate, they suggest that humanity is currently undergoing a species-wide evaluation. We're being studied, tested, and gradually prepared for something. The question is what, and whether we're ready for it. The consistency of these reports across different cultures, time periods, and geographical locations suggests that this phenomenon isn't limited to any particular region or population. It's global, perhaps even universal. The beings behind these encounters appear to be operating on timescales that dwarf human civilization, implementing plans that span generations or even millennia. What's particularly striking is the way these intelligences seem to understand human psychology and development. They don't reveal themselves in ways that would cause mass panic or societal collapse. Instead, they work gradually, selecting individuals who can process and integrate these experiences without losing their psychological stability. They seem to understand that consciousness expansion is a delicate process that must be handled carefully to avoid damaging the recipient. The technological aspects of these encounters point to civilizations that have achieved what we might call post-scarcity existence. They've mastered energy manipulation, dimensional travel, consciousness interface, and reality modification. They've moved beyond the limitations that currently constrain human development, suggesting evolutionary paths that we're only beginning to imagine. But perhaps most importantly, these encounters consistently emphasize consciousness over technology. While the technological capabilities displayed are extraordinary, the real focus seems to be on expanding awareness, developing intuition, and fostering a deeper understanding of existence itself. This suggests that true advancement isn't just about building better machines, but about evolving consciousness to higher levels of sophistication and integration. The witnesses often describe a sense of cosmic loneliness being alleviated through these encounters. They realize that intelligence and consciousness aren't rare accidents in the universe, but fundamental features of existence itself. This recognition brings both comfort and responsibility. Comfort in knowing that we're not alone, and responsibility in understanding that we're part of something much larger than ourselves. The gradual nature of these revelations suggests that humanity is being prepared for a significant transition. The witnesses describe feeling like they're part of a first wave, early adopters who are being prepared to help others navigate what's coming. They often report a sense of mission, a feeling that they've been chosen to help bridge the gap between current human understanding and a much broader cosmic perspective. The reality-bending aspects of these encounters challenge our most basic assumptions about the nature of existence. If consciousness can interface directly with reality, if matter can be manipulated through intention, if dimensional boundaries can be crossed at will, then the universe is far more malleable and responsive than we've imagined. This suggests that the limitations we experience aren't fundamental features of reality, but temporary constraints that can be transcended through proper understanding and development. The silent, careful nature of these contacts suggests beings who understand the delicate balance required for successful consciousness evolution. They don't impose their reality on us, but rather create opportunities for us to discover it ourselves. They seem to understand that genuine growth must come from within, that consciousness cannot be forced to expand, but must be invited and encouraged to do so. The transformative effects reported by witnesses suggest that these encounters are designed to activate dormant potentials within human consciousness. People don't just observe these phenomena, they're changed by them. They develop new capacities, new forms of perception, new ways of understanding the interconnectedness of existence. This activation process appears to be irreversible, creating permanent changes in how these individuals perceive and interact with reality. The consistency of these reports across different individuals suggests that these aren't isolated incidents, but part of a coordinated effort. The beings behind these encounters appear to be working from a comprehensive understanding of human psychology, consciousness development, and social dynamics. They know exactly how to approach each individual in ways that will maximize the probability of successful integration. The interdimensional aspects of these encounters suggest that our three-dimensional reality is just one layer of a much more complex, multidimensional existence. The beings conducting these contacts appear to move freely between dimensions, using our reality as a kind of interface point for deeper interactions. This perspective radically expands our understanding of what's possible and where consciousness can travel. The educational nature of these encounters suggests that they're not just about contact, but about preparation. The witnesses are being taught, trained, and developed for roles they don't yet fully understand. They're being given tools and perspectives that will be crucial for navigating the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead for humanity as a whole. The emphasis on individual transformation rather than mass contact suggests a bottom-up approach to consciousness evolution. Rather than revealing themselves to governments or institutions, these intelligences are working directly with individuals, creating a network of transformed consciousness that can gradually influence broader human development from within. The technological capabilities displayed in these encounters offer glimpses of what becomes possible when consciousness and technology are properly integrated. These aren't just advanced machines, but consciousness-responsive systems that blur the line between thought and reality. They suggest evolutionary paths where the distinction between mind and matter becomes increasingly meaningless. The careful timing of these encounters suggests that they're coordinated with humanity's developmental readiness. As we approach critical thresholds in our technological and social evolution, these contacts seem to be increasing in frequency and intensity. This timing isn't accidental, but reflects a deep understanding of developmental processes and optimal intervention points. The profound sense of purpose reported by witnesses suggests that these encounters are part of a larger cosmic plan. They describe feeling like they've been given a glimpse of humanity's potential future, a vision of what becomes possible when consciousness evolves beyond its current limitations. This vision provides both inspiration and motivation for continued development. As we consider the implications of these accounts, we're forced to confront fundamental questions about the nature of reality, consciousness, and our place in the universe. If these experiences are genuine, they suggest that we're living through one of the most significant transitions in human history. We're being prepared for a shift in understanding that will transform every aspect of human existence. The witnesses to these encounters often describe a sense of urgency, not panic, but purposeful acceleration. They feel that humanity is approaching a crucial decision point, a moment when we must choose between continued limitation and expanded awareness. The encounters seem designed to prepare certain individuals to help guide this transition, to serve as bridges between current human understanding and cosmic consciousness. The consistency of these reports across different witnesses suggests that we're dealing with a genuine phenomenon, not mass hallucination or coordinated deception. The transformative effects on witnesses, the consistency of details, and the profound implications all point to something real and significant happening at the edges of human experience. Perhaps, most importantly, these encounters suggest that the universe is far more conscious, intentional, and interconnected than mainstream science acknowledges. We're not isolated biological accidents struggling for survival on a random planet. We're part of a vast community of consciousness that spans dimensions, civilizations, and levels of existence we're only beginning to imagine. The question that emerges from these accounts isn't whether we're alone in the universe. We're clearly not. The question is whether we're ready to acknowledge our place in a larger cosmic community and take responsibility for our role in the ongoing evolution of consciousness itself. The witnesses to these encounters suggest that this readiness is being carefully evaluated and gradually developed. As we move forward, these accounts challenge us to expand our understanding of what's possible, to remain open to experiences that transcend our current worldview, and to prepare ourselves for a future that may be far more extraordinary than we've dared to imagine. The universe, it seems, is far stranger, more wonderful, and more conscious than we've ever supposed, and we're being invited to step into a larger understanding of our place within it. As we piece together these extraordinary testimonies, a profound pattern emerges that challenges everything we thought we knew about reality, consciousness, and our place in the cosmos. The witnesses we've encountered today didn't seek out these experiences. They were ordinary people living ordinary lives until something extraordinary chose to reveal itself to them. Their accounts, separated by geography and time, share remarkable consistencies that suggest we're witnessing fragments of a much larger phenomenon. The technological capabilities described in these encounters stretch far beyond our current understanding of physics. We've heard about beings who can manipulate time, fold space, interface directly with human consciousness, and create materials that shouldn't exist according to our scientific models. The crystalline formations, the impossible geometries, the seamless integration of thought and matter, all point to intelligences that have mastered aspects of reality we're only beginning to glimpse through our most advanced theoretical physics. But perhaps the most striking element isn't the technology itself, but the consistent message of transformation and evolution. These encounters aren't random or chaotic. They follow a pattern of careful, deliberate contact that seems designed to expand human consciousness gradually. The beings described don't arrive as conquerors or destroyers. Instead, they appear as teachers, guides, and observers of a species on the brink of a fundamental shift in awareness and capability. The forest encounters we explored reveal beings who understand the interconnectedness of all life, who can communicate through direct consciousness transfer, and who seem to be preparing selected individuals for something greater. The underground testimonies speak of ancient monitoring systems, of intelligences that have been watching and waiting for humanity to reach a certain threshold of development. The urban encounters suggest that this contact is becoming more frequent, more direct, as if some cosmic timeline is accelerating. What's particularly unsettling is how these experiences change the witnesses themselves. They don't just return to their normal lives unchanged. They report expanded awareness, heightened intuition, and a fundamental shift in how they perceive reality. Some describe ongoing contact, as if they've been recruited into a larger network of human-alien cooperation. Others speak of downloads of information, of knowledge that they didn't possess before their encounters but somehow understand completely. The consciousness interface technology described by multiple witnesses suggests that these intelligences don't just study us from the outside. They can literally connect with our minds, our thoughts, our deepest understanding of existence. This isn't crude telepathy or mind control, but something far more sophisticated, a merging of consciousness that allows for the direct transfer of knowledge and experience. It's as if they're upgrading our mental software, preparing us for a reality where consciousness itself becomes the primary tool for navigating existence. The physical evidence, while limited, is compelling. The crystalline formations that appear and disappear, the geometric patterns that emerge in natural settings, the technological artifacts that seem to phase in and out of our reality, all suggest that these encounters occur at the intersection of multiple dimensions. These beings aren't just visiting our world. They're operating from a framework of reality that encompasses multiple layers of existence simultaneously. What's most disturbing is the implication that this process has been ongoing for far longer than we realize. The underground facility testimonies suggest monitoring systems that have been in place for decades, possibly centuries. The forest encounters often involve beings who seem familiar with human history and development. The urban sightings frequently occur in locations with histories of unusual activity spanning generations. This isn't first contact. It's the continuation of a relationship that has been developing in secret for an extended period. The question becomes, why now? Why are these encounters becoming more frequent and more direct? The witnesses consistently report a sense of urgency, a feeling that humanity is approaching a critical juncture that will determine our future development. Some describe being told that we're on the verge of a technological breakthrough that will fundamentally alter our civilization. Others report warnings about environmental or social challenges that require a new level of consciousness to navigate successfully. The pattern suggests that these intelligences are not just observing human development but actively guiding it. The selective nature of the encounters, the careful calibration of each experience to expand consciousness without overwhelming the witness, the consistent themes of evolution and transformation, all point to a sophisticated program of species-wide preparation. It's as if humanity is being prepared for graduation to a higher level of existence, and these encounters are the final examinations. But preparation for what, exactly? The witnesses describe glimpses of futures where consciousness and technology merge seamlessly, where the boundaries between individual minds become fluid, where humanity joins a larger galactic community of evolved intelligences. They speak of challenges that require us to transcend our current limitations, to develop capabilities that seem impossible from our current perspective, but may be necessary for our survival and continued evolution. The underground testimonies are particularly revealing in this regard. They describe vast networks of monitoring and communication systems that span the globe, suggesting that these intelligences have been tracking human development across multiple civilizations and time periods. The technology described isn't just advanced, it's designed to interface with human consciousness at a fundamental level, as if it was built specifically for our species, by beings who understand our psychological and spiritual development better than we understand it ourselves. The forest encounters add another layer to this picture. The beings described there seem to represent a different aspect of this larger phenomenon, the spiritual and ecological dimension of human evolution. They appear to be guardians or teachers focused on helping humanity understand our connection to the living systems of Earth and the broader cosmos. Their message consistently emphasizes that our technological development must be balanced with spiritual and ecological wisdom if we're to avoid destroying ourselves and the planet that sustains us. The urban encounters represent perhaps the most concerning aspect of this phenomenon. As these experiences become more frequent and more public, they suggest that the covert phase of this relationship is drawing to a close. The beings seem to be preparing for a more open form of contact, one that will require humanity to acknowledge and integrate the reality of non-human intelligence into our worldview. This transition period appears to be what we're experiencing now, as more witnesses come forward with their experiences, despite the social and professional risks involved. What makes these testimonies particularly credible is their consistency across different types of witnesses and different geographic locations. The details vary, but the core elements remain remarkably similar. Highly advanced beings with consciousness interfacing technology, a focus on human evolution and preparation, physical evidence that defies conventional explanation, and a sense that humanity is approaching a critical transition point. These aren't the fantasies of a few isolated individuals. They're reports from credible witnesses describing encounters with what appears to be a coordinated phenomenon of global scope. The implications are staggering. If these accounts are accurate, then everything we think we know about human history, our place in the universe, and our future development needs to be reconsidered. We're not alone, we never have been, and we're currently being prepared for a transformation that will fundamentally alter what it means to be human. The question isn't whether this is happening, but whether we're ready for what comes next. The witnesses consistently report that these beings are not threatening in the traditional sense. They're not invaders or conquerors, but they are agents of change, and the changes they're facilitating are so profound that they will inevitably disrupt every aspect of human civilization. Our economic systems, our political structures, our religious beliefs, our scientific paradigms, all will need to be reconsidered in light of the expanded reality these encounters reveal. Perhaps most unsettling is the suggestion that this transformation is not optional. The witnesses describe a sense of inevitability, as if humanity has reached a point where we must either evolve or face extinction. The beings seem to be offering guidance and assistance, but they're also making it clear that the choice is ours. We can embrace this evolution and join the larger community of conscious beings, or we can resist and face the consequences of our limitations. The consciousness interface technology described by multiple witnesses may be the key to understanding this transformation. If consciousness itself is more fundamental than we currently realize, if it's the underlying fabric from which physical reality emerges, then learning to work with consciousness directly would represent the ultimate technological breakthrough. It would give us the ability to heal our planet, to transcend the limitations of our physical bodies and to explore realities beyond our current imagination. But it would also require us to abandon many of our current assumptions about the nature of existence. The individualistic worldview that has dominated human civilization for centuries would need to give way to a more interconnected understanding of reality. The competition-based economic and political systems that currently structure our societies would need to evolve into something more cooperative and sustainable. The materialistic philosophy that has driven our scientific development would need to expand to include consciousness as a fundamental aspect of the universe. The witnesses who've had these encounters often describe feeling like they're living between two worlds: the conventional reality that most humans still inhabit and the expanded reality they've glimpsed through their contact experiences. They report feeling isolated and sometimes frustrated by the gap between what they now know to be possible and what mainstream society is willing to acknowledge. Yet they also describe a sense of purpose and responsibility, as if they've been chosen to help bridge this gap and prepare others for the transformation to come. The pattern of these encounters suggests that this preparation process is accelerating. The beings seem to be expanding their contact beyond the small number of individuals who've been involved in this process for decades. They're reaching out to more people, in more locations, with more direct and undeniable experiences. It's as if they're building a network of human allies who can help facilitate the transition when it becomes public knowledge. The timing of this acceleration may not be coincidental. Humanity is currently facing multiple existential challenges: climate change, technological disruption, social fragmentation, and the potential for conflicts that could threaten our survival as a species. The solutions to these challenges may require capabilities and perspectives that we don't currently possess. The consciousness-expanding experiences described by these witnesses might be preparing us to develop exactly those capabilities. The underground facility testimonies are particularly relevant in this context. They describe monitoring systems that track not just human technological development, but also our social and psychological evolution. The beings operating these systems appear to be waiting for humanity to reach a certain threshold of readiness before revealing themselves more openly. That threshold may be approaching faster than we realize. The forest encounters add another dimension to this picture by emphasizing the spiritual and ecological aspects of human evolution. The beings described in these encounters seem to be teachers focused on helping humanity understand our connection to the living systems of Earth and the broader cosmos. Their message is that our technological development must be balanced with spiritual and ecological wisdom if we're to successfully navigate the challenges ahead. What's particularly striking about these forest encounters is how they consistently emphasize the interconnectedness of all life. The beings don't just communicate through words or even telepathy. They seem to share consciousness directly, allowing the witnesses to experience reality from their perspective. This shared consciousness reveals a universe where every thought, every action, every choice ripples through a vast network of interconnected awareness. The urban encounters represent the most visible aspect of this phenomenon, and they're becoming increasingly frequent and undeniable. The beings seem to be moving beyond the covert contact phase and beginning to reveal themselves more openly. The witnesses of these urban encounters often describe feeling like they're being prepared for a larger revelation, as if their individual experiences are part of a coordinated effort to prepare humanity for open contact. The technological demonstrations described in these urban encounters are particularly significant. The beings don't just show advanced technology. They demonstrate capabilities that seem to transcend the physical limitations of our current reality. They manipulate time, space, and matter in ways that suggest they've mastered aspects of existence that we're only beginning to understand through our most advanced theoretical physics. But perhaps the most important aspect of these encounters is how they consistently expand the witness's understanding of consciousness itself. The beings don't just possess advanced technology. They seem to have evolved beyond the limitations of individual consciousness. They appear to operate from a collective awareness that encompasses multiple individuals while still maintaining distinct perspectives and personalities. This collective consciousness model may be what humanity is being prepared to join. The witnesses often describe feeling like they're part of something larger during their encounters, as if their individual awareness is being connected to a vast network of conscious beings. This connection doesn't diminish their individuality, but rather enhances it by providing access to knowledge and perspectives that would be impossible to achieve alone. The implications of this collective consciousness model are profound. It suggests that the isolation and fragmentation that characterize much of human experience may be temporary conditions rather than permanent features of existence. The beings seem to be showing us that consciousness can be shared and expanded without losing individual identity or free will. In fact, they suggest that true individuality can only be achieved through connection to this larger network of awareness. The physical evidence associated with these encounters, while limited, provides important clues about the nature of this phenomenon. The crystalline formations, the geometric patterns, the technological artifacts that phase in and out of our reality, all suggest that these encounters occur at the intersection of multiple dimensions or layers of existence. The beings aren't just visiting our world. They're operating from a framework of reality that encompasses multiple levels of existence simultaneously. This multidimensional framework may be the key to understanding how these beings can appear and disappear so easily, how they can manipulate matter and energy in ways that seem impossible, and how they can interface directly with human consciousness. They're not bound by the three-dimensional limitations that constrain our current understanding of reality. They operate from a perspective that encompasses multiple dimensions, multiple timelines, and multiple levels of consciousness simultaneously. The witnesses often describe feeling like they're being shown glimpses of this multidimensional reality during their encounters. They report experiencing multiple perspectives simultaneously, seeing events from different points in time, and understanding concepts that they couldn't grasp from their normal three-dimensional perspective. These experiences suggest that human consciousness itself may be capable of operating at these higher dimensional levels, but we've forgotten how to access these capabilities. The consciousness interface technology described by multiple witnesses may be designed to help us remember and redevelop these capabilities. Instead of being purely external technology, it seems to work by activating dormant potentials within human consciousness itself. The beings aren't just showing us their technology, they're helping us remember our own forgotten abilities. This perspective transforms our understanding of what these encounters represent. They're not just contact with alien beings. They're a process of remembering and reclaiming our own true nature as multidimensional conscious beings. The aliens aren't foreign invaders. They're our own future selves, or perhaps our own higher dimensional aspects, helping us evolve into what we're capable of becoming. The urgency that witnesses consistently report may be related to the fact that humanity is approaching a critical juncture in our development. We're developing technologies that could either destroy us or elevate us to a higher level of existence. The choice we make will determine not just our own future, but the future of consciousness itself on Earth. The beings seem to be offering guidance and assistance, but they're also making it clear that the choice is ultimately ours. The pattern of increasing contact and revelation suggests that this choice point is approaching rapidly. The covert phase of this relationship is drawing to a close, and humanity will soon need to acknowledge and integrate the reality of non-human intelligence into our worldview. This acknowledgement will require a fundamental shift in how we understand ourselves, our history, and our place in the universe. The witnesses of these encounters often describe feeling like they're living in a time of unprecedented change and possibility. They report sensing that humanity is on the verge of a breakthrough that will transform every aspect of our existence. The encounters themselves seem to be part of the preparation process, expanding human consciousness and capability in advance of this transformation. As we consider the full implications of these testimonies, we're forced to confront the possibility that everything we thought we knew about reality, consciousness, and our place in the universe may be incomplete or incorrect. The witnesses aren't just reporting encounters with advanced beings. They're describing a reality where consciousness is fundamental, where multiple dimensions of existence intersect, and where humanity is being prepared for a transformation that will fundamentally alter what it means to be human. The question that remains is whether we're ready for this transformation. The witnesses consistently report that these beings are not threatening in the traditional sense, but they are agents of change, and the changes they're facilitating are so profound that they will inevitably disrupt every aspect of human civilization. Our ability to navigate this transformation successfully may depend on our willingness to expand our understanding of reality and embrace the expanded capabilities that these encounters suggest are our birthright. The testimonies we've explored today offer us a glimpse into a future where humanity has transcended its current limitations and joined a larger community of conscious beings. Whether this future becomes reality depends on the choices we make in the coming years. The witnesses of these encounters have provided us with a roadmap, but the journey itself is one that humanity must take together. As we examine these extraordinary accounts collectively, a profound pattern emerges that challenges our fundamental understanding of reality itself. These encounters, spanning decades and continents, share remarkable consistencies that suggest something far more significant than isolated anomalies or psychological phenomena. The witnesses describe beings and technologies that operate beyond our current scientific paradigms, yet their actions appear purposeful, measured, and ultimately benevolent. What strikes researchers most profoundly is the apparent restraint these entities demonstrate. If their capabilities truly match what witnesses describe, they could have revealed themselves openly long ago, or, conversely, remained completely hidden. Instead, they seem to operate within carefully maintained boundaries, engaging with select individuals in ways that expand consciousness without causing widespread panic or disruption to our social structures. The consistency of certain elements across these encounters cannot be easily dismissed. Witnesses repeatedly describe technologies that manipulate matter at the molecular level, craft that defy our understanding of physics, and beings that communicate through direct consciousness transfer rather than verbal language. These descriptions emerge from people with no prior contact with each other, spanning different cultures, educational backgrounds, and belief systems. Perhaps most intriguingly, many experiencers report receiving information about humanity's future that proves remarkably consistent. They describe a species in transition, approaching a critical evolutionary threshold where consciousness itself becomes the primary tool for understanding and interacting with reality. This information suggests that what we perceive as solid, physical reality represents only a fraction of a much larger, interconnected, multidimensional existence. The underground discoveries particularly fascinate researchers because they provide potential physical evidence for these claims. The geometric patterns and symbols found in deep cave systems display mathematical relationships that seem to encode information about consciousness, reality, and cosmic connections. These discoveries suggest that contact may have been occurring for far longer than previously imagined, possibly throughout human history. Ocean encounters add another layer of complexity to this phenomenon. The vast, unexplored depths of our oceans could easily conceal entire civilizations or installations. Witnesses describe underwater structures that dwarf anything humans have constructed, operating with technologies that seem to harness the fundamental forces of nature itself. These accounts suggest that Earth may serve as a kind of way station or observation post for multiple advanced civilizations. The forest encounters reveal perhaps the most intimate aspect of this phenomenon. In these natural settings, witnesses report profound spiritual experiences that permanently alter their perception of reality. They describe feeling connected to a vast network of consciousness that extends throughout the universe, experiencing what they can only describe as unconditional love and acceptance from beings far more advanced than ourselves. Urban sightings demonstrate that these phenomena are not limited to remote locations. Even in our most populated areas, witnesses report encounters with beings that seem to exist partially outside our normal space-time continuum. They appear and disappear at will, manipulate electronic devices through unknown means, and seem to monitor human activity with particular interest in our technological and social development. Medical examinations of experiencers have revealed curious anomalies that conventional science struggles to explain. Some individuals show evidence of cellular regeneration beyond normal human capacity, while others display enhanced cognitive abilities or expanded sensory perception following their encounters. These physical changes suggest that contact involves more than simple observation, potentially including deliberate enhancement or preparation for future interactions. The psychological profiles of witnesses consistently contradict the stereotype of unstable individuals seeking attention. Most are reluctant to share their experiences. Understanding the social costs of such revelations, they tend to be articulate, educated, and previously skeptical of such phenomena. Many report that their encounters completely transformed their worldview, leading them to pursue scientific or spiritual paths they had never previously considered. Children's accounts prove particularly compelling because they lack the cultural conditioning that might influence adult interpretations. Young witnesses describe their encounters with remarkable clarity and consistency, often providing details about advanced technologies or cosmic concepts that exceed their educational background. Their drawings and descriptions frequently match those of adult experiencers, suggesting exposure to genuine phenomena rather than imagination or suggestion. The acceleration of these encounters in recent decades appears to correlate with humanity's technological advancement and global interconnectedness. As our species develops more sophisticated tools for communication and observation, we may be approaching a threshold where open contact becomes not only possible but necessary for our continued development. Some researchers propose that these beings operate according to protocols similar to our own scientific ethics, avoiding interference with developing civilizations until they reach certain developmental milestones. Our nuclear capability, space exploration, and global communication networks may signal that we are approaching such a threshold. The implications of these encounters extend far beyond the question of extraterrestrial life. They suggest that consciousness itself may be the fundamental building block of reality, with physical matter representing one expression of this deeper phenomenon. This perspective aligns with cutting-edge theories in quantum physics, while offering explanations for phenomena that conventional science cannot address. As we stand at this crossroads in human history, these encounters may represent preparation for a transition that will fundamentally alter our understanding of existence itself. The consistent message from experiencers suggests that this transition is not something that will be imposed upon us, but rather an opportunity that we must choose to embrace. The evidence continues to accumulate, from government disclosure documents to credible witness testimony to physical trace evidence. While definitive proof remains elusive, the patterns are too consistent and widespread to dismiss entirely. We may be witnessing the early stages of the most significant development in human history, the recognition that we are not alone in the universe and that our future depends on our readiness to evolve beyond our current limitations. As we step back and examine these extraordinary accounts, a profound picture emerges that challenges everything we thought we knew about our place in the universe. These aren't random encounters or isolated incidents, but pieces of a larger puzzle that reveals an ongoing, purposeful interaction between humanity and intelligences far beyond our current understanding. The consistency across these testimonies is remarkable. Witnesses from different continents, cultures, and backgrounds describe similar beings, technologies, and messages. They speak of entities that operate beyond our physical laws, manipulating matter and consciousness with ease, yet approaching us with apparent benevolence and patience. The recurring themes of spiritual evolution, collective awakening, and humanity's potential transformation suggest these encounters are part of a carefully orchestrated preparation for something momentous. What makes these accounts particularly compelling is their source. Military personnel, scientists, pilots, and everyday citizens with nothing to gain and everything to lose by sharing their experiences. Their courage in speaking out, despite potential ridicule and career consequences, lends credibility to their testimonies. Perhaps most intriguingly, these encounters consistently point toward a universe that is far more conscious, interconnected, and alive than our current scientific paradigm suggests. They hint at realities where consciousness itself is the fundamental force, where dimensions overlap, and where humanity stands at the threshold of an evolutionary leap that could transform our species forever. Whether these experiences represent literal contact with extraterrestrial beings, interdimensional entities, or something else entirely, they share a common message. We are not alone, we are not forgotten, and our future holds possibilities beyond our wildest imagination. The question isn't whether these encounters are real, but whether we're ready to embrace the profound implications of what they might mean for humanity's next chapter.